not sure how quickly information has spread around, but I do know that at least a few of you are aware of the problem that has recently arisen. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank you for coming on such short notice, but the problem at hand is very significant and does require immediate attention. Now, I will let Mr. Lincoln do the briefing.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, we have been conducting a series of U-2 flyovers in Cuba. However, this Sunday, the flyovers captured these somewhat disturbing images. Closer inspections show that the Russians have in fact been constructing medium-range surface ballistic missiles in Cuba. I don't have the real pictures with me today, but I will draw you something. I will draw you a diagram. We have identified 32 of these missiles, each with a range large enough to fire on the most southeastern portion of the U.S. Times 32.
Thank you, Mr. Lincoln.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that Russia told us that they would avoid putting missiles in Cuba. However, this just serves to make the matter more complicated. For now, we can assume that Khrushchev is not simply planning on starting a war. However, beyond that, his intentions are unclear. So, my suggestion is that we create a plan as quickly as possible so that we can execute it under any circumstances. What are your thoughts?
If we allow the missiles to stay where the Russians place them, it will show the world that the Russians can do whatever they want, and we cannot stop them. This action will still act as a statement to the rest of the world.
Precisely. If we allow the missiles to remain in Cuba, the Soviets will undoubtedly come back stronger and push harder than before. It seems to me, Mr. President, that whatever we do, we must get the missiles out of there no matter what. Either we continue to pressure the Russians until somehow they give in, or we simply go all the way.
All the way?
We hit them, Mr. President. Take out the missiles with an airstrike. However, if this option does indeed become our final choice, we must act before the missiles become operational.
Agreed. Whichever option comes into action, I think we can all agree that we must get those missiles out of Cuba as quickly as possible. Well, meeting adjourned, I guess. Well, what do you suggest?
This might sound unlikely, but a think tank just might work. Let's gather some of the best intelligence around and start another meeting, keep them locked up until they come up with something.
Are you guys sure this think tank is such a great idea?
Look, guys, we need to get started quickly. This matter is of the utmost importance.
Well, if we need to start the meeting so quickly, let's get back to the matter at hand.
So, to re-outline the issue, Russia has put missiles in Cuba despite their previous statements. So, we've established two options so far. First of all, we can just politically pressure them into trying to take them out, possibly making a deal. Second off, the seemingly more popular option is to conduct an airstrike in Cuba to take out the missiles directly.
The problem I see is that if we bomb Cuba, the Russians will come back full force, and that won't be good.
If we bomb Cuba, then we will start a war. So we should be proactive and bomb Russia as well, with nuclear weapons. We don't have to start a war. We can bomb Cuba without having to bomb Russia.
So if we do completely ignore the diplomatic option, which I think at this point we have two main choices. We can either bomb Cuba and proactively bomb Russia as well, which would start a war, or we can go ahead with the airstrike in Cuba and just hope for the best.
I have an idea. I propose they put a blockade all the way around Cuba.
But putting a blockade around Cuba is an act of war.
It's not an act of war if we call it a quarantine.
I honestly think that's our best choice.
Okay, then I guess it's settled. We're going for the blockade. We can hold them off with that long enough to strike some sort of deal with Khrushchev. In the meantime, I think it's time to go public with the matter as well. I'll make the announcement live tonight.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Only last Thursday, as evidence of this rapid offensive buildup was already in my hand, Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko told me in my office that he was instructed to make it clear once again, as he said his government had already done, that Soviet assistance to Cuba, and I quote, pursued solely the purpose of contributing to the defense capabilities of Cuba, unquote. That, and I quote him, training by Soviet specialists of Cuban nationals in handling defensive armaments was by no means offensive. And that if it were otherwise, Mr. Gromyko went on, the Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also was false. Acting therefore in the defense of our own security and of the entire Western Hemisphere, and under the authority entrusted to me by the Constitution, as endorsed by the resolution of the Congress, I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, will, if found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations. I call upon him further to abandon this course of world domination and to join in an historic effort to end the perilous arms race and to transform the history of man. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved.
Okay, do we have any news on the blockade so far?
Actually, the Soviets have tried to break through the blockade a few times. I think this calls for an attack.
Wait, no, Mr. President, I have other news.
Okay, I think I'm going to hold off for the attack a little bit longer. What news do you have?
My reporter friend is in contact with a Russian spy who says he can help us strike a deal with Russia.
Well, let me guess, they want us to dismantle our missiles in Turkey. Well, I mean, we can't do that. That would lose us all of our diplomatic power.
Actually, I'm thinking that we could offer to not invade Cuba.
I think we should go for the offer. Meanwhile, you try and hold off the Soviets as long as you can without a direct attack.
Mr. President, I have some news. The offer worked, and the Russians have agreed to another meeting.
So, I hear you Americans are here to offer us a deal regarding the situation in Cuba.
Yes, I'm here on the highest authority.
I've heard a rumor that the Americans are willing to offer to pull out of Cuba permanently. However, I hope you realize that this will not be enough for the deal.
In my opinion, that's a good deal. What else do you require?
Well, we were hoping that the Americans might possibly take their missiles out of Turkey.
I'm afraid I can't do that. We would lose all of our political power.
Well, in that case, I think that we are both done here.
Wait, 1 minute. We might have one more option. We can't officially pull out of Turkey, but we can promise that the missiles be out of there. We can make sure that the missiles be out of there in 6 months at least, but you have to promise not to go public with this information.
That sounds like a very promising offer. I will definitely let my superiors know about your new deal.
Yeah! Oh! Yeah! Oh!